Welcome back to Everyday English Lounge. If you are walking, washing dishes, folding laundry, or sitting in front of one task you really do not want to start, you are in the right place.
Yes, especially if you have already opened your to-do list 3 times, stared at it like it betrayed you, and then decided the wise next step was another cup of coffee.
That is a very specific person.
Because I know him. He is me. My to-do list somehow behaves like a disappointed theater teacher.
And maybe you know that feeling too, where the task itself is not impossible, but something inside you just steps back and says, no, not today.
Or, I will begin when I feel focused, inspired, hydrated, emotionally balanced, and maybe wearing better socks.
Which is lovely in theory and not very useful on an ordinary Tuesday.
Ordinary Tuesday is where most life happens, not on your best morning, not after the perfect breakfast, just Tuesday with low battery and one missing sock.
So, if your motivation has been low, and you feel behind or guilty or strangely disappointed in yourself, stay here.
We are talking to you, and also a little bit to me. My gym shoes have spent time as decorative objects.
They are innocent shoes. They did not ask to become furniture.
Not yet, but they have seen things.
Today, we are talking about how to stay disciplined when you have no motivation.
Which matters because real life does not pause until your mood improves. Work still needs doing, language practice still matters, bills still exist, and laundry continues its mysterious expansion.
We will keep this clear and natural for English learners around B1 to B2. So you do not need to catch every word. Stay with the main idea and come back later if you want another listen.
And one small thing for later, if this episode helps you, you can leave a comment with one line about your own habit struggle. We really like hearing what real life sounds like for you.
I think this topic matters because many people secretly believe motivation should lead and discipline should follow.
Right, and discipline sounds a little strict. It sounds like a person who wakes up at 5, drinks cold water on purpose, and never forgets a password.
That image does not help. Discipline is not about becoming a machine. It is about giving your future self a little structure when your feelings are unreliable.
So let us start there, with the moment when the feeling is simply not coming.
Imagine this. It is 6:40 in the morning. Your alarm went off 10 minutes ago. The room is cold. Your exercise clothes are on the chair. You said last night that today would be the day you finally start again.
And now you are sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at those clothes like they belong to a different, much more successful person.
Exactly. You are not lazy in that moment. You're in a small argument between intention and emotion. Last night you made a plan. This morning your body wants comfort.
Here is where people say, well, discipline means doing it anyway. But honestly, if doing it anyway feels like punishment, most people do it twice and then disappear.
I agree, and I want to sharpen that. Discipline is not the same as harshness. If your version of discipline always sounds angry, your mind will treat the habit like a threat.
So what is the better version? Because be kind to yourself can sound nice and still leave you in bed with the innocent shoes.
The better version is to make the first action smaller than your resistance. I call this the minimum version. Not the ideal version, not the impressive version. The version you can begin even on low power.
So instead of I will exercise for 40 minutes, the minimum version could be I will put on my shoes and walk outside for 5 minutes.
Yes. And for English study, it could be I will read one paragraph or I will listen for 3 minutes and repeat one sentence. For writing, maybe you open the document and write 2 honest lines.
People often laugh at that because it sounds too small. But small is the point. Tiny actions lower the emotional temperature. Suddenly the task is not a mountain, it is a door handle.
That image matters. When you have no motivation, you do not need a heroic identity speech. You need something your nervous system does not reject.
Let me push on that a little. If I only do the tiny version every day, am I not just becoming a very disciplined person who does almost nothing?
Fair question. The minimum version is not the ceiling. It is the doorway. Some days you stop there and that still protects the habit. Other days, once you begin, energy shows up late and joins you halfway through.
So the first win is not finishing. The first win is removing the excuse that the task is too big for today.
Yes, because once the task fits inside the day, You stop treating yourself like a broken project and start treating yourself like a real person with real limits.
I have felt that. The hardest part is often the 5 minutes before starting. Then after 10 minutes, I think, oh, so the problem was not the task. The problem was my dramatic entrance.
Yes, and that is such an important misunderstanding. We think motivation creates action, but often action creates a little motivation. Not all at once, not magically, just enough to keep moving.
So maybe ask yourself this, listener. What are you waiting to feel before you begin? Ready? Clear? Confident? Less tired? And what if the task does not actually require that feeling?
Let me give another scene. You come home from work. Your brain is full. You promised yourself you would practice English after dinner. But the sofa is soft, the kitchen is messy, and your phone suddenly becomes fascinating.
That phone always discovers its personality at exactly the wrong time.
In that moment, the minimum version could be almost laughably small. Sit at the table. Open the notebook. Write one sentence about your day. Or play 1 minute of audio and repeat it out loud.
And that sounds almost too easy, but it changes the question from, do I feel motivated, to can I do one honest minute?
Right. Discipline grows when the habit feels doable on bad days, not just beautiful on good days.
Also, one honest minute is still more useful than 20 imaginary minutes.
Very true. Imaginary effort is exhausting. Real small effort is quiet.
I think that is why your shoes became furniture, by the way. They were part of a very ambitious story. The story had great lighting. It did not have a beginning.
The shoes are innocent, but the plan was too big.
If you remember nothing else from this part, remember that. Make the plan smaller than the mood. Then begin before your mind opens a debate club.
The second shift in this conversation is about friction. Friction means small things that make an action harder to start. Not huge barriers, just enough annoyance to stop a tired person.
Like when your book is in another room, your charger is missing, the desk is covered with receipts, and suddenly your future as a disciplined adult collapses because of one spoon in the sink.
Exactly. People think they need more willpower, but often they need fewer tiny obstacles. If the good habit is inconvenient and the distraction is easy, tired you will choose easy.
This is where routines scare some people, though. They hear routine and imagine life becoming gray, stiff, and painfully organized.
I want to challenge that. A good routine is not a prison. It is a relief. It removes a few decisions so your energy can go to living, not negotiating with yourself every night.
That makes sense. I do not need motivation to brush my teeth. I just do it because it belongs to a place in the day.
Exactly. The goal is not to make every habit exciting. The goal is to make it familiar. One useful method here is an if-then plan. If this happens, then I do that. Very simple, very plain, very effective.
For example, if I finish my tea after dinner, then I sit at the desk and do 10 minutes of English. Or, if I put my bag down after work, then I change into walking clothes.
Yes. You are connecting the habit to a real moment instead of to a vague hope. The day gives you a cue, and the cue starts the action.
I love that because vague hope is really unreliable. It says, maybe later, and later is a very dangerous neighborhood.
And you can help yourself even more by shaping the room. Put the notebook on the pillow. Leave the headphones on the table. Place the shoes by the door where they can stop pretending to be decor.
Thank you for respecting their truth. Also, I need to confess something. When people say, set a cue, I always imagine a dramatic bell. But usually it is just boring common sense.
Which is why it works. Discipline is often less glamorous than people expect. It is a glass of water already on the counter. It is your phone in another room. It is the first page already open.
There's also something emotionally kind about this. You are not testing your character every evening. You are saying, I know I get tired, so I will make the good choice easier.
That is such an important point. Sometimes people call that cheating, like using structure means you are weak. I think the opposite. Building a life that supports you is a wise adult skill.
There is a reason late-night willpower feels fake. By evening, most people have already spent their good decisions on work, messages, traffic, dishes, and staying decent in public.
Which is why preparation is love, not control. You are leaving breadcrumbs for your future self so they do not have to find the way home in the dark.
Let me push back once more. What if routine makes you bored, though? Some people need freshness. They want freedom.
Then, keep the container stable and the content flexible. Walk at the same time but choose a different street. Study English after tea, but switch between listening, reading, and speaking. Structure and freshness can live together.
That feels much more humane. The frame stays, the details can breathe.
Here is a scene for you, listener. Imagine tomorrow night. You finish dinner. There is a pause. Usually that pause becomes scrolling. What if instead there is already a pen on the table, a short lesson ready, and one clear sentence in your head? After tea, I begin for 10 minutes.
Notice how different that feels from I should probably do something productive later. One is a doorway, the other is fog.
So here's the question for this part. What one cue can you place tonight that makes tomorrow easier? Not perfect. Easier.
Because easier is often the whole game. Tea is not a personality, but it can be a useful signal.
The hardest part, though, may not be starting. It may be returning after you stop.
Yes. Missing one day is annoying. Missing 3 days can suddenly feel like a moral failure, a personality diagnosis, and the end of civilization.
Which is amazing because objectively it is often just 3 days. Maybe you got sick. Maybe work exploded. Maybe your child woke up at night. Maybe your brain was simply heavy.
But emotionally, it does not feel like 3 days. It feels like proof. See? I knew I was not disciplined. I knew the good version of me was temporary.
I really want to push back on that story. A break is not proof of fake commitment. A break is part of real life. The question is not, did I stay perfect? The question is, how quickly and how gently can I return?
That word gently matters. Because after a break, people often come back with punishment energy, huge plans, strict rules, a strange desire to compensate for the lost days all at once.
Yes, and that usually fails because it comes from shame, not steadiness. Shame wants a dramatic repair. Discipline wants a repeatable repair.
That is very good. Shame wants fireworks. Discipline wants Tuesday.
Exactly. One method that helps here is the 2-day rule. Try not to miss twice in a row if you can help it. One missed day is life. 2 missed days starts to become a new pattern.
I like that because it is firm without being cruel. It does not say, never fail. It says, come back before the silence grows.
And if life is truly chaotic, come back smaller. After a rough week, do not promise 90 minutes. Read 1 page. Walk once around the block. Record 1 voice note in English. Re-entry matters more than intensity.
That reminds me of a listener message we got a while ago. She said she kept quitting because every restart had to feel meaningful. Then one week she tried a tiny restart instead. She read 2 pages before bed for 6 nights. That was it. And suddenly she trusted herself again.
That is the deeper goal, really. Not just a finished task, but self-trust. Every time you return, you teach yourself, I am a person who can come back.
And self-trust is quieter than confidence. Confidence says, I can do a lot. Self-trust says, I will come back. The second voice lasts longer.
Yes, because it can survive ordinary failure. It does not need a perfect streak to keep believing in you.
Let me raise a concern, though. Some people hear self-compassion and turn it into endless permission. It is okay. I will start tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes a cousin of later.
Then compassion needs precision. Be warm, but be clear. Do not say, it is fine, whatever. Say, today was hard. I am still doing 5 minutes. Kindness without action becomes fog. Action without kindness becomes punishment.
That is one of my favorite lines today. Also a little rude because it is true.
Let me paint one last scene. Imagine a nurse finishing a long shift, or a parent after bedtime, or a student after a heavy week of exams. They are not empty because they are weak. They are empty because life costs energy.
So if that person does a tiny version instead of the full version, that is not failure. That is wisdom meeting reality.
Yes, quiet progress is still progress. You are not behind because your energy changed. You are only asked to keep finding the next honest step.
And maybe that is the real meaning of discipline in adulthood. Not control at all times. Return at the next chance.
So here is the question for you now. When you miss a day, what story do you tell yourself? And what story would make it easier to come back?
Maybe a better story is simple. I paused. I did not end. That one has room to breathe.
I love that. I paused. I did not end.
There is something powerful about a calm sentence like that. It does not turn you into the villain of your own week.
And the story matters because behavior often follows language. If you keep saying, I ruined everything, your next action gets heavier. If you say, I paused, return feels possible.
This shows up in very small places. Someone misses 2 evening study sessions, then avoids the desk for 4 more days because the desk now feels like a witness.
Yes, the desk becomes emotional, which is almost funny until you live it. Then the return has to be gentle and concrete. Sit down. Open the book. Read for 3 minutes. Leave before the shame gives a speech.
I love that image. Do not let shame take the microphone.
Exactly. And sometimes the smartest thing is to rehearse the return before you need it. Decide now what you will do after a bad day, not during the bad day.
So maybe the plan is, if I miss my usual session, I do 5 minutes before bed, or if the whole day falls apart, I read 1 page tomorrow morning with coffee.
Yes, you are building a bridge back, not a courtroom. That is still discipline. In fact, that may be the most adult version of discipline.
Because adults do not live in perfect conditions. We live in changing energy, changing schedules, and the occasional emotional weather report that says visibility is poor.
And yet even then, one small return can change the week. Not because it is dramatic, but because it breaks the silence between you and the habit.
I think that is why people often feel moved by very ordinary effort. Someone reads 2 pages, takes 1 walk, studies 10 minutes, and somehow it feels brave.
It is brave, because it is humble. It says, I will work with reality instead of waiting for a better version of myself.
Which, to be clear, is much less glamorous than the movie montage, but it has a much better success rate.
Maybe that is exactly what some listener needs to hear today. You do not need a grand recovery. You need an honest return before the story in your head gets louder.
And an honest return is very different from emotional revenge. You are not trying to punish yourself for the lost days. You are trying to reconnect with a habit while it is still small enough to touch.
So if tonight is messy, let messy be messy. Do the smallest real thing and let that count.
Which sounds much better than, my shoes have once again become symbolic furniture.
All right, before we close, let us do our word tour. 10 useful expressions from today's conversation, slowly and clearly.
If you want, say them out loud with us. Your room may be quiet. Your bus may be noisy. Your kitchen may smell like onions. All study locations are welcome.
First word, motivation. Motivation is a feeling or desire that makes you want to do something.
Example, I had motivation on Monday, but by Wednesday I needed a different plan.
That is why motivation is helpful, but not enough by itself. Feelings rise and fall, and they do not always arrive on schedule.
You can hear this word in work talk, study talk, fitness talk, and everyday life when people explain why starting felt easy or hard.
Repeat, motivation. One more time, motivation. Second word, discipline. Discipline means steady action, especially when excitement is low.
Example, she studies a little every night. That is discipline. Notice, no dramatic music required.
In simple words, discipline is reliability. It is not punishment and it is not perfection. It is a practice of returning.
This word sometimes sounds severe, but everyday discipline can look quiet, normal, and kind. That is the version we like.
Repeat, discipline. Again, discipline. Third word, consistency. Consistency means doing something regularly over time.
Example, my English improved because of consistency, not because of one perfect weekend.
This is a very useful habit word. Small repeated action often beats one big burst because it keeps the door open.
If you want progress that lasts, consistency is usually more important than intensity. That sentence is worth remembering.
Repeat, consistency. Slowly, consistency. Fourth word, friction. Friction means small resistance that makes an action harder to start.
Example, there was too much friction, so I kept delaying my study session.
Friction can be physical, like a messy desk, or digital, like your phone pulling you away. Tiny barriers matter more than people think.
I like this word because it reminds us that the setup matters, not only personality. Sometimes the room is part of the problem.
Repeat, friction. One more time, friction. Fifth word, routine. A routine is something you usually do in the same order or at the same time.
Example, reading before bed is part of my routine, so I do not need to decide every night.
A routine can feel calming because it saves mental energy. It gives the habit a home inside the day.
And a good routine does not need to be boring. The frame can stay the same while the details change and stay fresh.
Repeat, routine. Again, routine. Sixth word, cue. A cue is a signal that reminds you to begin.
Example, after I make tea, that is my cue to open my notebook.
Think of a cue as a trigger. One action or moment points naturally to the next, so starting feels less random.
Time can be a cue. A place can be a cue. Even brushing your teeth can be a cue if the habit always follows it.
Repeat. Cue. Short word, clear sound, cue. Seventh phrase, follow through. To follow through means to do what you said you would do.
Example, I make plans quickly, but I do not always follow through. Very honest. Very human.
This phrase is common in daily English, especially when people talk about work, goals, promises, and habits. It is very useful.
If you start often but finish rarely, follow through is probably the phrase you want. It points to action after intention.
Repeat, follow through. Again, a little slower, follow through. Eighth word, reset. Reset means to start again in a cleaner or calmer way after things got messy.
Example, last week was chaotic, so today is my reset. That sounds hopeful, not ashamed.
I like this word because it leaves space for a new beginning without heavy drama. It feels practical and light.
A reset can be big, but often the best reset is simple. One small action today that breaks the feeling of drift.
Repeat, reset. One more time, reset. Ninth phrase, tiny win. A tiny win is a very small success that still matters.
Example, I only wrote one paragraph, but it was a tiny win and it helped me keep going.
This phrase is useful on heavy days because it teaches your eyes to notice movement before big results appear.
Tiny wins build trust. They tell you, something happened today, even if it was not huge or impressive from the outside.
Repeat, tiny win. Again, tiny win. 10th phrase, show up. To show up means to arrive and take part, even when conditions are not perfect.
Example, I did not feel motivated, but I still showed up for 10 minutes. That is a great sentence for real life.
In habit language, show up often means you begin honestly. Maybe not brilliantly, but you are present, and presence matters.
Many good weeks begin with one small moment of showing up. That is why this phrase is simple but powerful.
Repeat, show up. Last one together, show up.
Those are our 10 for today. Keep the ones you need and try using them in your own sentences this week.
Even one repeated phrase can make a new idea feel more natural in your mouth. Now take one slow breath. If this episode found you on a tired day, I hope you feel a little less alone.
You do not need a brand new personality. You probably need a smaller next step and a gentler way back.
So here is your tiny homework. Pick one habit that matters to you.
Then write the minimum version of it. Make it so small that your dramatic Tuesday brain has very little to argue with.
And if you can, set one cue tonight. Put the book on the pillow, the shoes by the door, or as a note by the kettle.
If you want, tell us 2 things in the comments. What habit you want to protect, and what tiny version you will actually do this week.
We really do read those. And your examples help other listeners feel less strange and more understood.
If this conversation helped, you can pass it on to one friend who is being too hard on themselves.
You can come back to this anytime your motivation goes missing.
We will be here, and hopefully the shoes will remain innocent.
This was Everyday English Lounge. I am Mia.
And I am Leo. Take care, and come back to it.